So once more sharing the good news. Luang Por Tongdaeng will be here at Dhammagiri. He has very kindly accepted our invitation. And we will have program here Sunday, the 23rd of April, Monday, the 24th, and then Anzac Day, national holiday, Tuesday, the 25th, until after the meal. So 3 days with Luang Por Tongdaeng. We will have a one-day retreat on Sunday the 23rd, same format like today. Unfortunately, Luang Por has only about 8 days in Australia. Because we have extended the invitation, he will go first to Dhammagiri, and then on Anzac Day he moves on to Bodhisattva Monastery, Ajahn Dhammasiha in Sydney, and then he goes to Adelaide, Bodhipala, with Ajahn Dippo, and then he has another 2 nights or something in Melbourne, Buddha Bodhivana, with Luang Por Kalyano. All these 3 abbots I just mentioned have been here repeatedly. I think you all know them, that we have close relations. We had mentioned to Luang Por Waen in the beginning that we are happy to facilitate if he likes to visit other monasteries. Luang Por Tongdaeng is actually the teacher of Ajahn Kantiko. Ajahn Kantiko ordained in his monastery. Wat Doi Mae Luang. Wat Doi Mae Luang near Chiang Mai, that is near Luang Por's monastery. And this is where Ajahn Kantiko, the tall German monk, started his monastic life. So I'm very happy that we have a genuine disciple of Luang Por staying with us. It was already invaluable to have Ajahn Kantiko here for all the preparations. He's also great in anything IT and computer related, because he used to do professional installations of computers, networks, and so on. And he's very handy. So we have many runs-to bondings. How are you keeping, Dr. Malik? Is it still okay when we are sending you all these orders to buy online? Digitize. Is that stressful for your husband, or you can easily handle it? Yeah, great. Because when we have someone here like Ajahn Kantiko who can really get it done, it's useful not to seize on the opportunity. I'm not so sure whether so many people in their 90s can handle the internet as well as you. I know people much younger who find it difficult to navigate through the order on the internet. So much appreciated. Oh, is the pollution still going? Yeah, this is actually over a huge area in Southeast Asia. It comes from the stubble burning on the fields, from chena cultivation when they burn the forest down, and also just generally people like to burn. And if it doesn't rain in the dry season, at the end of winter, when I was there, it was perfectly fine. But I think recently it was so bad, I think they said more than 100,000 people had to go to hospital in Thailand because of that. So I'm sure Luang Por will enjoy some fresh air here in the eucalyptus forest in Australia. I always found that very healthy, the atmosphere here. Luang Por Liam said the same. Because even if it's hot in Dhammagiri, we usually have no ventilation, we have a nice breeze. That's really good. After 25 years, Luang Por Liam went to New Zealand. You see, and we had him already the 4th time, even if it was short. also mentioned in the latest newsletter about Luang Por Tongdaeng, I put the links to Luang Por Liam's Dhamma talks. The two talks are available. One is also both on podcast and YouTube with a slideshow. We have beautiful photos. And now within 1 month, the second outstanding meditation master. I'm very happy about that. It's also the second visit. He came the first time in 2010, June 2010. And Nina, Ajahn Vavadhamma's mother, in those days there was no Bodhisattva yet, but she had the city center, Bodhikusuma, and she had invited him. And because they used to live in Brisbane earlier, I think that she still had connections here, and then she traveled with him through Australia and Ajahn Moshe, and then they came here for one night, and just the two monks. He really liked it here. Luang Por Tongdaeng is actually from the Dhammagiri Nikaya. There's two main sects or Nikayas of Theravada Buddhism in Thailand. The vast majority, close to 90% of the monks, are actually in the Maha Nikaya, which is why it's called the Great Nikaya. But Ajahn Mun and many of the disciples of Ajahn Mun, they are in the Dhammagiri Nikaya. And that is Luang Por Tongdaeng's background. So it's also nice that we have someone from Dhammagiri tradition coming.
So, Luang Por Tongdaeng, I read a little bit biography about Luang Por Tongdaeng. So, Luang Por Tongdaeng teacher is Ajahn Uttamo, Ajahn Uttamo, Ajahn Mun disciple, Ajahn?
Yeah, that is correct. That is the one he ordained with. I sent out a little biography. We don't really have that much. He's not yet very known, and there's very limited information in English. But he's born in 1954, which is the year of the horse, like Ajahn Chah, and like Dhammasiha. So I trust we will be getting on very well. And he ordained already as a novice. And that was with Luang Por Wan Uttamo. But already as a novice, he also trained with Luang Por Waen. And there's already a connection because Ajahn Hasapanyu, you may remember, Canadian monk who stayed here. And he lived for quite a number of years in Luang Por Waen's monastery. Wat Doi Mae Pang, which is also up north in Thailand, a little bit further away from Chiang Mai. So, and I have stayed there as well. Actually, they had reserved the royal kuti for me, because in the 1980s, the late King Rama IX of Thailand, he used to visit Luang Por Waen quite a bit. And then they built this special royal kuti for him. It still has got a very beautiful wallpaper and very high, much higher than normal kuti. And they put me in there when I stayed for about a week. And then Luang Por Prasit was one of his teachers, another outstanding teacher in the Dhammagiri and Ajahn Mun tradition. I think Luang Por Prasit is the one who became quite famous when he was old and he needed an operation. And they operated on him, and I think it was a thigh bone. It had already crystallized while he was alive. You may have heard of the relics, the little relics which you can have, in particular of enlightened, realized meditation masters, realized Nibbana. And after the cremation, their body is often producing these relics which basically look like precious stones. They don't look like bones or anything, they look like precious stones or like crystals. And in this case, amazingly, the doctor found that he had already a very unusual kind of crystallized structure in his bone while he was alive. I managed to pay respects to Luang Por Prasit with Ajahn Dhammasiha when I visited him in 2015, I think, or 16. But he was already very elderly and couldn't really teach. He just bowed. However, another very important teacher for Luang Por Tongdaeng was Luang Por Plien. And Luang Por Plien I know quite well because he visited the monastery in Perth when I was staying there. And he was one of the Ajahns who really inspired my faith, my conviction in the Thai forest tradition. He's well known for being very psychic and very energetic. I remember Luang Por Plien when the teachings would go on in the evening. Usually he would already teach for evening drink. And then 6 o'clock, evening drink. Then 7 o'clock we would move to the Dhamma hall. He would do formal teachings, starting at 7, and by usually between 10 and 11 at night time, Ajahn Dhamma would fade out as a translator. He would be too tired, he couldn't translate anymore because he was going all day. After 4 or 5 hours translating, he was too tired. And then after a while, Luang Por Plien would notice that. And then he would end the session and he would go back to his kuti. By now we are getting close to midnight. And whoever of the monks would be most energetic, they would accompany him and give him maybe a foot massage. And while we are doing that, he would continue teaching. And when these most energetic monks, and by 1 or 1:30 in the morning, and they are too tired, they would end the session and they would go back to their kuti to sleep, and then Luang Por Plien would go on his walking path and practice some walking meditation because he has been sitting so much. And the next day the same program, and the same thing in the evening, and at noon he would teach the lay people, and it can also go for hours. Well, unbelievable energy. Yeah, for sure, yeah. He was very well known for his samadhi. Even Luang Por Tongdaeng, I think that he started at only 11 years as a novice. And the teacher asked him, I can't remember, he had to sit 6 or 8 hours a day for formal meditation. He found it a little bit difficult in the beginning, but later he pulled through, and then he really enjoyed meditating as a young novice. And his teacher was probably Luang Por Wan Uttamo. He probably recognized that he has exceptional parami. Because normally if you try to make an 11-year-old sit 8 hours a day, you may put them off of meditation forever. They just can't do it. But in his case, some fairly quick, his mind settled down, and then he was very determined to stay in robes because he enjoyed it so much, the meditation. Luang Por Plien is also, so the teacher of Luang Por Tongdaeng, is also the first senior monk who visited us after we started Dhammagiri, after we bought the property. It was a coincidence that when the contract was settled, that is for the top property, because in the beginning we didn't have this one here, the house and this 10 acres we didn't have. We only had the top. And within 5 days of the settlement, and we owned it now, he happened to visit the Dhammayut temple at the Gold Coast, together with Tantra Kun Mahasamai. Because I knew Tantra Kun Mahasamai, and he speaks good English, and I thought we tried to do a little abduction, a kidnapping. And fortunately, Tantra Kun Mahasamai cooperated with that. And I knew about the flight which we would arrive, and then we went to the Gold Coast. And on the way to the Gold Coast, I already tried to keep my mind very wholesome, because I had to convince the Luang Por to come with us rather than going straight to the Thai temple. It would be a delay of at least 3 hours. So I was doing the Buddho. Actually, I'm usually doing Bhagava, Adahang, Buddho, Adahang, Bhagava, Bhagava, Adahang, Buddho, Adahang, Bhagava, Adahang, Buddho, Adahang, Bhagava. And I did that quite consistently. And you wouldn't believe it, at the Gold Coast airport, right at the gate where he would come out, the domestic, I could go to the gate. They had actually a big picture, a framed picture of a head of the Buddha. So I thought, no, this is an amazing coincidence. So I placed myself right next to that, Anjali, continuing, Bhagava, Adahang, Buddho, Adahang, Bhagava. And then Luang Por and Sakon Nakhon and I think another monk, they came out, and the Thais were too late. They were too late. They were not even there. So with Sakon Nakhon translating and already preparing Luang Por, we could convince him. We just started a new forest monastery, and I'm not sure whether he could remember me, but I told him about visits here in Perth and that we have met. And then very kindly he agreed to going here. I was actually a little bit on the edge with the precepts about 100% honesty, because when he asked how far away is that, I said it took me an hour to come, which wasn't a lie, but I didn't come actually from here. I was in a different place. Because if I had said 1.5 hours, he might have declined or something. So it wasn't a lie, but it wasn't 100% super truthful. And I could notice during the drive out here, he started feeling a little bit, why does it take so long? And these people have to wait for me now in the Thai temple. And he appeared a little bit not so amused by that. But once we were on top of the property and he walked along the ridge there, he really warmed up and became quite enthusiastic. And on the highest point, on the summit, there was nothing yet. There was only this big water tank and the concrete wall. That was all we had. But on the summit, we had prepared a tarp and a little Buddha statue. And then we invited him, we paid respects, and he would sit down and meditate for a short while. And after that, he seemed to have a fairly good idea about Dhammagiri, and he gave some advice. He was concerned about dryness, about water. But as we have town water, it's not really a problem. But of course, it's correct that there can be severe droughts here. But he wasn't aware that later that we could connect to town water, which is very helpful. And he mentioned that the place is actually very suitable for developing deep meditation. I was very happy about that he said that. And another amazing thing, then we walked back, and without having this property, and we were already wondering, how do we build facilities on top? How do we get the cars up there? Because a car park takes endless space, and on the ridge it would just destroy it all. If possible at all. And how do you park 100 cars or something on the ridge? And where do we put the Dhamma hall and so on? And when I asked him about that, he just pointed down the hill, and he said, the lay people, the facilities, that should all be at the bottom of the hill. And I tried to get across to him, not speaking Thai, and then Sakon Nakhon translating for me. But it was a bit difficult, and I tried to get across that we can't build here because we don't own it. We only have this concrete road going up, and then the property on top. But 2 years later, this one became available, and we managed to acquire it. And it turned out exactly how he had advised, or can even say predicted.
And very fortunate that I was also there that afternoon when he came to the top of the monastery, and he said that this monastery will be one of the foremost monasteries in Australia. That was his prediction.
Dr. Gamani was also there, and as mentioned, he was very positive. And even just the change, and he was tired, he was at that stage already elderly. It was one, I think, of his very last international travels. So we were extremely lucky. Even Ajahn Chattamalu, who knows him very well, he couldn't get him to Germany because later he was sick and then he couldn't travel anymore. But his health was already frail, and he was really not so amused about this long car trip and the Thais having to wait there. But once he was here, and he really liked it. And he said meditation, so he made us some very nice compliments. And Dr. Gamani was one of our witnesses for that. And he is a very important teacher of Luang Por Tongdaeng. To the extent that Luang Por Tongdaeng is currently building a stupa for Luang Por Plien. It's a bit unusual. Usually the stupa for such an outstanding master is done in his own monasteries. But Aranyavivek, Luang Por Prien, has got had a large monastery which is still there near Chiang Mai as well. But Luang Por Tongdaeng is so close to him that the official main stupa for Luang Por Prien will actually be in his monastery. I had an opportunity to climb on the top of that stupa as it was in the building process when I was there in January. Fortunately, they don't have health and safety in Thailand. Just in sabong and sandals, clambering up on this bamboo scaffolding, and the workers really liked it, having the monks coming up there. What I like about Luang Por Tongdaeng that he has got a very strong metta. You can also see it. He has got, after leaving here, even here it's only 3 days. And actually less than 3 days, more like 2.5. And then he is going to 3 other monasteries. But the reason is that he has this very strong metta, and when people ask him something, he usually tries to support and act for their welfare. And he's very beautiful in his calmness and gentleness. However, that may betray the fact that he has practiced very diligently and with great dedication and a very difficult meditation. He's quite an expert on dukkha vedana meditation. That is pain meditation, investigating pain. And a well-known way of doing that is simply to sit and not to change your posture. And after 4, 5, 6 hours, it's usually unbearably painful, unless you're in samadhi, which wouldn't be so much the point of that meditation object. It's meant that you sit without moving until it is really, really painful. The whole body can feel like on fire. And that is a very good insight meditation object. When we saw him in January, he talked about that quite a bit. Must admit, it's not exactly my favorite meditation object. But it's a very good one where often people can make very fast progress in vipassana and insight. If you do anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, it's easy to fall asleep. If you do pain meditation, you usually don't fall asleep. And if you do metta or other meditation objects, it's easy to get into some fantasies, planning. If you do pain meditation, you usually don't get into any distractive fantasies, and pain is so strong that you can't get away from it. And if the person has the determination, and even more important, the wisdom, the panya, to really investigate that, they often can make very good progress. But he also talked about the value of repeating itipiso, to a mantra chanting with itipiso. Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicca Charana Sampanno Sugato Lokavidu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati Saddha Deva Manusanang Buddho Bhagavati Itipiso Bhagava Arahang. Like 108 times is a common one that people repeat it 108 times. And he said, no, this is the most powerful mantra at all. Because it's describing the qualities of our Buddha, but of all Buddhas. Any quality mentioned in the Itipiso chant is fully applicable to all Buddhas. It's not only specific to Buddha Gautama. And secondly, he said, no, this is how the Buddha described it himself. That is the shortest and most well-known description the Buddha himself has given of his own qualities. There's a combination of that. The Buddha, supreme being in the universe, this is a short description of his essential qualities, what makes him so unique, and in his own words. And then additionally it applies to all Buddhas. So if we repeat that, if we chant that, it's very, very powerful. Have you ever done 108 times Itipiso? Good, good. I can also do 1,008 times if you like. It's possible to keep going. You can do it all night. It's no harm. No, Itipiso, this indeed. Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho. The Bhagava is usually translated the Blessed One, the Fortunate One, the Exalted One. It's still used in India. You may have heard of Bhagwan Sri Vajneesh. They would use the same epithet still for gurus nowadays in India. It's difficult to translate. The Fortunate One, Blessed One, Exalted One. Arahang is the worthy one. Samma Sambuddho is the perfectly awakened one. The Buddha literally means awakened. When you wake up in the morning, Buddhati. But of course, not just waking up from sleeping, but in a profound sense, waking up from the sleep of delusion. Vicca. Yeah. Exactly. Someone mentioning that there's a monk in Sri Lanka, and sometimes elephants come to possibly attack him or to circumambulate. They circumambulate. And then he chants the Itipiso. Yeah, it's a good one. Although there's a special chant for elephants, what the Buddha said to the Naga, which I can also do, but Itipiso is always great. Vicca Chadana Sampanno, that means endowed with knowledge and conduct. That's also one reason why he's also known as a Tathagata, the thus gone or the thus come. So there's no contradiction between his teaching and his action. There's no contradiction between his speech and his thought. Ordinary humans, they may think one thing and tell you something different and act again different. But with the Buddha, it's all one thing. His teaching, the way he's thinking, the way he's speaking, and the way he's acting is in perfect sync, in perfect harmony. That is meant by Vicca Chadana Sampanno. I think this is a really important one. And to me, if a spiritual teacher is acting and doing really unwholesome things, I immediately lose interest in whatever they may be teaching. It's actually quite possible that someone can be intellectually brilliant and the talk sounds fantastic, even if they are doing really bad things. It's not impossible. But I think a good criterion for a spiritual teacher is that you see that their actions are roughly in line. I mean, not every spiritual teacher is necessarily fully enlightened and perfectness, or they may still have weaknesses and sometimes say things not so skillfully and so on, but at least that one can notice that there's a good basis in virtue. But in the Buddha, there's obviously perfection in both the knowledge and in his conduct, in his perfect conduct. Sugato, literally it means well gone, but it's also the meaning of welcome. The most welcome being. You can't be more happy about anyone appearing in this world than the Samma Sambuddho. Loka Vidu, the knower of the universe, both in the more external sense, the different realms of existence, down from the hell, animals, hungry ghosts, humans, the different levels of central heavens, the different levels of Brahmaloka, the pure abodes of the Anagamis. And also in the psychic powers, he could go to the moon, to the sun, to other solar systems, that would all be possible. But on a more profound sense, the world is the six sense spheres. And the Buddha would know that and would know where it comes from, how it arises, what is the condition for the universe to arise, and what is the condition for the universe to cease. The cessation of the universe, the experience of Nibbana. Anattaro Purisa Dhamma Sarati, the supreme trainer of those willing or amiable to training. This is Dhamma, Purisa Dhamma Sarati. It's not the Dhamma, Dhamma, but was used in India, for example, for an animal which is not yet trained. And once they have finished their training, then they are danta, fully trained. So that indicates the unique ability of the Buddha to train humans, to train monks, nuns, to train male and female upasakas and upasikas, that they can attain Nibbana. This is where Buddha is noticeably different even to the most outstanding arahants, that he can really establish a sasana, that he can get other beings to realize the same thing. Sattha Deva Manusanam, the teacher of gods and humans, expressing that he is actually not teaching only humans. In sheer numbers, the Buddha probably had taught many more devas. When he did the first sutta here, what you see in the pedestal, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, setting in motion the wheel of Dhamma, on Asala Puja, full moon day, and it starts the Vasa, was only 5 humans. And only one of them attained the first stage, stream entry. But they say there were countless thousands of devas. And then the rejoicing would reverberate through all the different levels of the heavens. So in pure quantity, the Buddha would have been teaching more devas and spirits and humans. Sattha Deva Manusanam Buddho. The Buddho is the awakened one, someone who has woken up from the sleep of delusion, woken up from the illusionary dreams of self and permanence. And Bhagavan once more. So really, you can't really translate it very well. The exalted one, the blessed one, the fortunate one. Of course, if you know the meaning, then the chant is more powerful. It's also in our chanting book. You can just look. Do you have one of our chanting books? I mean, personally, can give you one if you come up, pass you one. It's good to know it in English as well. It will make the practice of doing that mantra much more powerful. It reverberates deeper in your mind. In general, if you do Buddho, or the whole thing, Itipiso, Bhagava, the stronger your faith, the stronger your knowledge about the Buddha and what really makes him so special, and the more devotion and so on, the more powerful the mantra usually is. The power is not so much just in the words. No, the power is more like what your mind associates and understands about these words. So if you go on pilgrimage, if you study the life of the Buddha, if you do your regular Buddha puja, expressing your faith and devotion, this is all building up the resonance body. I like that really about our little... It's not that big, but it has a very sonorous, resonant sound. But when I visited Nalanda Buddhist Society in KL, they have one of these gongs and it's like that big. And of course, the sound, this one can't compare. And if you're so really so similar, and you can say your mind is like the gong. And each time when you strike the gong, it's like when you repeat the mantra. But if you have more knowledge about the Buddha and more faith, then each time repeating the mantra is like having a bigger gong, and will reverberate stronger in your mind. There's also the probably most common meditation object the Buddha would teach to the laity. Repeating Buddha is a well-known padikamma for so many disciples of Luang Por Man. Luang Por Mahabua famously established his samadhi first with that one, and only afterwards he did the dukkha vedana pain meditation. And this is a meditation object which makes you feel very happy quickly. A pain meditation doesn't start by making you feel happy naturally. But repeating it so with some understanding, you feel uplifted. Also makes you very confident. It also gives us a sense of wholesome self-esteem. There's so many people who have problems nowadays with negativity to themselves, to the extent even self-harming, guilt, guilt trips, riddled by guilt and remorse and inferiority complex, all these kind of things. The moment when we have conviction in the Buddha, we have faith, confidence in the Buddha, and we understand some of his qualities at least, that act in itself is enough to give us an uplift and feel more confident and more happy. The Buddha actually said it's a source of happiness to have something to worship, to have something to look up to and respect. Some people think the greatest thing may be if everyone worships and admires me. If I become super famous and they all admire me. But look at people who are having that. It often completely crushes them. There's so many of these young pop stars, movie stars, celebrities. It's very, very difficult to handle that. So what people like, what they desperately try to do in getting their likes on their Insta and followers on Twitter and YouTube and whatnot, and is actually often rather harmful. You don't really get anything from that. What is really beneficial for our own mind is to have something that is worthy of respect, and then to express that respect. That is what really gets your mind in a wholesome state and gives you a wholesome self-esteem. Talking quite a while. If there's any questions, I can also check here live stream.
Ajahn, he brought those purple flowers this morning. And as she brought them in, everybody said, "Oh, how beautiful." Why is that?
Okay, so I'm getting the question that T, was you who bought the purple flowers? No? Anyway, someone bought purple flowers, and then everyone said, "Oh, they are so beautiful," and now you're asking why. I guess because they are beautiful. What do you want me to explain? To go into the philosophy of beauty? Or is an unresolved in Western philosophy is one of the big questions, and is unresolved. It's one of the big questions of Western philosophy. What is beautiful? What is beauty? What can I know? What is the world or the universe? What is beauty? And these are the classic questions of Western philosophy, and they've been working on that since Plato for about 2,500 years, and I think they haven't found a full answer yet. It's quite intriguing why certain things are beautiful and why that has such a strong impact on our mind.
Gandhi told me that the Buddha told somebody who asked him what his doctrine was. See but only see, smell but only smell, taste but only taste, touch.
I think this is such a profound and deep teaching. I think I had to go for another Dhamma talk. I think I can't go into that. This is a very, very famous but a very difficult and profound teaching. But the teaching to buy here. But there's also beauty in Dhamma. And that is the best beauty you can discover. And an appreciation of beauty is what can lead you into samadhi. Rather than trying to explain why is something beautiful or what exactly is that. In terms of using it, if you're an aesthete, if you have a strong sense of what is beautiful or aesthetic, then I would recommend you to delight in Dhamma, because there's great beauty in the teaching of the Buddha, or to find beauty in the meditation object. The breath can be very beautiful when it becomes calm and soothing, and contemplating the qualities of the Buddha, and that can be very beautiful. The Buddha himself was very beautiful. He was having the 32 characteristics of a unique human being, which will become only either a returning emperor or a Buddha. So he would have a great physical beauty as well. But more important is the beauty of his Dhamma and the beauty of the meditation object. I mean, Schopenhauer, who I liked very much, he has got a quite elaborate theory about beauty. And he says when you are in the state of aesthetic contemplation, that the kind of defilements, the particular craving, is a little bit in abeyance. If you listen to some extremely beautiful music, or you see a very beautiful Buddha statue, and you're really awestruck by the beauty or beautiful sunset in nature. Natural beauty is something the Buddha enjoyed. And even an ascetic monk like Venerable Ma Kassapa, he has got these beautiful verses, Pali verses, describing the beauty of nature where he lived. And that can be very helpful for deepening your samadhi. Schopenhauer said that your defilements, in particular in the craving, is kind of inactive when you are aesthetically contemplating, when you're enjoying something very beautiful. And it's quite true. And if you watch a beautiful sunset in nature, just yesterday there was someone from northern New South Wales, and we talked about Nimbin Falls, Nimian Falls. Forgot the name now. It's a breathtakingly beautiful falls, not so far from Byron Bay. We went there a couple of months ago. Minion Falls, I think. Minion Falls. And it's just absolutely beautiful. And when you watch that in nature, a beautiful waterfall, a beautiful sunset, you don't usually feel angry. You don't usually feel jealous. You don't usually feel depressed. You're not overcome by doubt. So I think contemplation of beauty can have a little bit an aspect of samadhi. And on the other hand, if you find your meditation object ugly and unattractive, you will find it very hard to attain samadhi with that one. So it's good to develop a sense of beauty in your meditation object.
It's a reflection of impermanence too. Beautiful flowers, and then just after a few days we just saw.
Yeah, that is the traditional puja, that you contemplate, that the beauty of the flowers fades away. Of course, the flowers is very central. It's a very central beauty. There's actually in the Devata Samyutta, there's an event where a monk living in the forest, and then he is smelling the beautiful fragrance of some flowers. And then the Deva accuses him of theft because he steals this experience. Of course, it's not really theft in terms of precepts, but the Deva wanted to admonish the monk and not to get lost in sensuality. This is why you can't wear flower garlands today. You're on 8 precepts. The mala gandha viripana, the wearing of flower garlands you can't do on 8 precepts because it's very sensual. So this puja is meant that people don't get lost in the sensuality of having beautiful flowers. So samadhi is the contemplation of beauty which is in a non-sensual way. Often people, when they think of beauty, they may think of that in a more sensual sense, a very attractive person of the opposite sex. But that is obviously not the kind of beauty that the Buddha would be encouraging to contemplate. But having nature, beautiful nature, even the great monks and the Buddha himself could appreciate that and would feel happy and uplifted. And if your heart is happy and uplifted, it's already reducing the 5 hindrances. And the great beauty is the light which you can see, the obasa in samadhi, or when the mind settles down in samatha meditation, is incredibly beautiful. The people who have good upachara samadhi, not even jhana yet, even just upachara, you may see light which is much brighter than the sun, but it's not hurting your eyes because you're not seeing it with the eyes. Can you imagine that? Seeing a light which is brighter than looking directly into the sun? But it doesn't hurt and it's just so beautiful and you feel just intrigued by the beauty of that light. Now, this is a kind of experiences you can develop in samatha meditation, the samadhi meditation. And that is a very wholesome beauty. When you see that beautiful light, sometimes also called the nimitta, in your meditation, it means that you usually don't feel any of the hindrances much.